Drive down any interstate today, and you'll see the same 4 or 5 nameplates over and over. Freightliner, Peterbilt, Kenworth, Volvo, Mack. That's about it. But that's not how it used to be. When I started out, the American highway was full of names you'd never see today. Whole companies, some of them older than the interstate itself, gone. Not because they built junk. Most of them built better than what replaced them. They died from mergers, from bean counters, from a strike that never ended, and in one case from being 20 years ahead of everybody else. 10 American truck brands that don't exist anymore. And what actually killed them? Fageol died in 1938. We start with a name almost nobody remembers, and that's a shame, because you've been looking at its ghost your whole life. Fageol, out of Oakland, California. 2 brothers building heavy trucks and buses back when most freight still moved by rail. They built good iron, but the Depression gutted them, and by the late 30s, Fageol was finished. Here's the part that matters. A logger named T.A. Peterman needed trucks to move his own timber, couldn't find any he liked, so he bought the old Fageol plant and started building his own. He put his name on them, Peterbilt. Every Pete on the road today traces back to a company that failed. The brand died, but the shop lived. Corbitt died 1958. Down in Henderson, North Carolina, there was a man named Richard Corbitt who started out building horse-drawn buggies and ended up building some of the toughest trucks in the South. Corbitt built heavy haulers, military trucks during the war, and they had a reputation for surviving roads that weren't really roads yet. Red clay, no pavement, loads nobody should have been hauling. What killed Corbitt wasn't a bad truck, it was scale. When the big northern builders started mass producing, a small southern shop couldn't match them on price. By the late 50s, it was over. That's the story you're going to hear again and again today. Good trucks, wrong size company. Federal died 1959. Federal Motor Truck out of Detroit. 50 years in business, right in the heart of the American auto industry, and today you'd struggle to find a driver under 60 who's heard the name. Federal built solid, unglamorous working trucks. Dump trucks, fire apparatus, military rigs. Nothing flashy, just iron that showed up every day. But sitting in Detroit turned out to be a curse, not a blessing. Federal was surrounded by giants with deeper pockets and better dealer networks, and when the post-war boom cooled off, there wasn't room for a mid-sized independent. They shut the doors in 1959. Diamond T died 1967. Now this one hurts. Diamond T out of Chicago. They called it the Cadillac of trucks, and for once the nickname was earned. Chrome grills, deep glossy paint, hoods with actual styling on them at a time when everybody else was building plain steel boxes. A Diamond T looked like somebody cared. Drivers loved them. Owner-operators saved up for them. And then the mergers came. White bought Diamond T. White also owned REO. In 1967, somebody in an office decided 2 brands were one too many, and they folded them together into Diamond REO. Nobody asked the drivers. That's the thing about a merger. A truck can be perfect and still get erased on a spreadsheet. If your family had one of these in the yard, put the name in the comments. I want to see how many of these old brands still have people who remember them. REO died 1967. Same year, same merger, other half of the story. REO stood for Ransom E. Olds. Yes, that Olds, the man who put his initials on Oldsmobile and then went and started a second company. REO built the Speedwagon, which is where the band got the name, and for a while they were one of the biggest truck builders in America. But REO spent decades being sold, restructured, and passed around, and by the 60s the fight had gone out of it. When White merged it with Diamond T, the REO name went with it. 2 proud nameplates walked into 1967. One awkward hyphenated brand walked out. Diamond REO died 1975. And that brand didn't last either. Diamond REO limped through 8 years. The trucks weren't the problem. The C-119 and the Raider were legitimate heavy haulers, and the ones still running today are proof. The problem was a company built out of 2 dying companies, carrying both sets of debts. In 1975, Diamond REO went bankrupt. A dealer in Harrisburg, Pennsylvania bought the rights and kept building small numbers for years, which is why you'll still spot one at a show and wonder how it survived. 2 brands merged to save each other. Both ended up dead anyway. Brockway. If you want to know how much a truck brand can mean to a town, you need to know about Brockway. Cortland, New York. They built the Husky. That's the chrome dog that sat on the hood, and drivers were fiercely proud of it. The town called itself Husky Town, USA. Not a marketing slogan. That's genuinely what people called their home. Mack bought Brockway in 1956 and ran it as a separate line for 20 years. Then came 1977, a labor dispute, a strike, and instead of settling it, Mack simply closed the plant. The town lost its plant and its identity in the same week. And here's what tells you everything. Almost 50 years later, Cortland still holds a Brockway truck show. People trailer those old Huskies in from all over the country. The company has been dead longer than most of my viewers have been alive, and the dog still gets a parade. White. Died 1980. White Motor Company. The giant. Founded in 1900 in Cleveland. And I mean the white that bought Diamond T, bought REO, bought Autocar. For most of the 20th century, they were one of the biggest truck builders in the country, and their Road Boss and Road Commander rigs were everywhere. So what happened? White spent decades buying other companies, and every purchase came with debt. Then the 70s hit. Fuel crisis, recession, a freight market that fell apart. In 1980, the whole thing went into bankruptcy. Volvo bought the truck operation. For a few years, you'd see Volvo white on the hood, and then just Volvo. The company that swallowed half the American truck industry got swallowed itself. And the name that survived on our highways came from Sweden, Marmon. Died 1997. Now here's the opposite of a mass production story. Marmon, out of Texas. They didn't build trucks on a line, they practically built them one at a time. Hand-assembled, aluminum cabs, and you could spec almost anything you wanted. Owner-operators who bought a Marmon talk about them the way people talk about a custom rifle. The trouble with building trucks by hand is that it costs a fortune, and you can never build enough of them. Marmon was owned by a much bigger holding company, and when the numbers stopped working in the 90s, they simply stopped. The last Marmon rolled out in 1997, under 300 trucks in some years. Today they're worth serious money, and every one of them is a reminder that best and profitable are not the same word. Sterling. Died 2009. The most recent one, and the one plenty of you actually drove. Here's the twist most people don't know. Sterling was Ford. Ford built heavy trucks for decades, decided in the 90s that heavy trucks weren't worth the trouble, and sold the whole line to Daimler in 1997. Daimler needed a name, dusted off Sterling, and put it on the hood. For about 12 years, Sterling was the budget option in the Daimler family, sitting underneath Freightliner. Drivers knew it. Cheap interiors, rattles, electrical gremlins. Then the 2008 crash hit. Truck orders collapsed, and Daimler looked at three brands competing with each other. In 2009, they killed Sterling. 12 years old and gone. 50,000 trucks still on the road, and the parts got harder to find every year after. 10 names: Fageol, Corbett, Federal, Diamond T, REO, Diamond REO, Brockway White, Marmon, Sterling. And notice what actually killed them. Almost none of these companies died because they built a bad truck. They died from mergers, from debt, from being too small, from being too expensive to build right. And in Brockway's case, from a strike nobody would settle. The iron was usually the last thing that failed. Now I know I left some out. Autocar, Hayes, Available, Ward LaFrance. There were dozens, so tell me in the comments, which dead brand should I have included? And if you ever drove one of these, I want to hear what it was really like. If you want more stories about the iron that didn't make it, subscribe to the channel. I'm Dale. Keep the shiny side up, and I'll see you down the road.